Gilan Gork.
It's good to be here.
Welcome to the podcast.
Again.
What an absolute pleasure. What an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
We just had a little bit of a recording issue, so we've had to just backtrack a little bit. But what a pleasure having you on the podcast. I know how busy you are, and what an exceptionally busy person you are, and to have you here is just absolutely such a pleasure. So I really appreciate it.
It's great to be here, man.
For the guys and for the listeners who don't know who you are, let me run through it quickly. In addition to being a very accomplished mentalist, you're also the owner of the Influence Institute. You're an author of a book called The Persuasion Games. You're a corporate speaker. And then, of course, there's a trainer, this label that's been put in, which I think really fits in nice with sort of the Influence Institute in terms of what you do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's lots going on. I think a lot of people think that being busy is a sign of success.
Yes.
And I'm not convinced about that. I think that being busy is great, but also having balance and being able to be present and being able to, I think that, it's great to be busy, but sometimes it's good just to kind of bring it all in.
Absolutely. We were both talking before this podcast, and we both use an app called Headspace.
Yes.
Yeah, which is quite a nifty little app in terms of just trying to center yourself and getting that balance. You know, I'm a management consultant by day, and I often say to the guys, there's a very big difference between being busy and being productive. I hear so many people say, I'm busy, but what are you actually achieving in being busy?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that so many people, when you say, oh, how are you? And they go, oh, I'm so
busy.
And then what you find is that suddenly you get people thinking that that's a good thing. So now you and I will meet and I'll go, oh, you look so tired. As if to say... And I think I'm being nice, right?
Yes.
Because what I'm trying to say is, like, I can see that you're busy with stuff, because also people on social media, and we all think, so we all feel like we're connected, and like, I know what's happening in your life. Oh, you look so tired. Meanwhile, that's like, well, stuff you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But it's because people, and I think there's also, I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but in terms of influence and consumer trends and that kind of stuff, I think that there's a lot of money to be made in the market of helping people who are so tired from being so busy, because everyone's trying to be busy because they think that that's a sign of success.
Absolutely.
So it's great to be busy, but like, I agree with what you said. It's all about what are you putting out there. And then having a bit of headspace for yourself.
For us, I mean, it would be content. In this space, it would be content. And from a business point of view, it's what is the content specific to what it is you're trying to achieve in your business. And I think there's often a disconnect. Young business owners often find themselves in the business as opposed to being on top of the business. So they're doing all the work and trying to run it. And that's a tall order.
Yep.
And look, that's what it takes initially to create success, but it's a tall order.
Yeah, that's the position that I've been in for most of my life.
Yeah.
And that I'm still very much in now, is that I am the product, I'm the manager, I'm the MD, I'm the
Although
marketer.
I have to say, you've got somebody, and I haven't obviously met her, but I have spoken to her. Her name's Angelique, and she's the reason we're sitting here. And she's amazing.
Yes.
So thank you,
She is
Angelique. You
amazing.
see the shout out. It's the internet, so I can do what I want.
Exactly.
So Gilan, take me back to, and I'm really fascinated in this. How did you get involved in mentalism? And then not only the mentalism side, but how did you get in the mentorship to actually become a mentalist, which first and foremost, very few people are. And then secondly, to become a success in this country with the entertainment industry sort of the way it is very difficult.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where I started, was with entertainment. And you're right, it is kind of limited here in the country in terms of entertainment, because it's quite a small market, and that also makes it quite difficult to break through as well.
Sure.
So it comes with its challenges and pros and cons and so on. Look, ever since I was a child, I knew that I wanted to be on stage, and my parents always told me that they knew from when I was younger that I was going to be on stage in front of people and a performer. It was just my childhood dream. I don't know where it comes from. No one else in my family has that.
Oh, really?
So
you're the white or the black sheep?
Yeah, my dad's an accountant. My mom's a teacher. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. None of them were involved in entertainment in any shape or form. And I was always kind of the clown, in the family. I would put on shows for my family on Sundays, and we would have a big family lunch every Sunday. And,
oh, wow.
And I would always put on probably a really terrible show. They were probably laughing at me.
Not with you.
Not with me. But that was such a passion of mine. I nearly failed school because all I wanted to do was to be on stage. Yeah, I was already getting on stage for paid events when I was 12.
Yeah.
So this was just an absolute passion of mine.
Wow.
And I happened to meet mentalists when I was a teenager at a braai.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
So it's what we call the allied arts are hypnotists,
Yes.
mentalists,
Okay.
and magicians.
All right.
Now, this is why you often people will see magicians on TV doing stuff that's mentalism, right? And because usually there's an interest because it has the same wow feeling. If you watch a mentalist, you still go, wow, that's amazing, the same way that you
Yes.
would if you had to see a hypnotist or
Agreed.
a magician or whatever. So you find that people know each other in those industries, what we call those the allied arts,
Allied
right?
arts. Wow. Okay. Cool.
So I just happened to meet some mentalists through some magician friends of mine at a braai because they were passing through the country.
Wow.
And you know, they blew me away. And when I figured out that I actually had quite a knack for it,
Yeah.
this was something that then became a huge interest of mine. And I then landed up entering a magic competition
Okay.
when I was much younger.
Sure.
And as a mentalist. And I won the whole competition. I beat all the magicians in.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, while that was probably looking back now, that was quite a small event if
Sure.
you think about it. But for me, that was
Yeah,
just
it
a
shaped
sign. I realized, you know what, this is something I can do, and something that I really enjoy. So I decided to become a mentalist. But I didn't know that it was going to be a career at that point.
Sure.
Because I was I was having fun. I was making a bit of pocket money, so to speak.
Yeah.
It was just little bits here and there. But it was really when I was a little bit older and I was quite entrepreneurial. I had a couple of different businesses.
Okay.
I had an online business when I was in Standard 7. Most people call it grades now, but I think we're from the same era. Where it was
Standard
standards.
7. If you speak grade, I have no idea what you're talking
Exactly.
about. You've lost me.
Exactly. So Standard 7.
Wow. Already an online business. Selling?
In Standard 7, I put myself on an online, on a website development course.
Okay.
Right? And I mean, you and I were chatting a little bit earlier about us being in this little micro generation called Zennials.
Yeah, you
right?
told me. Thank you for introducing me to
Yeah,
that.
like halfway between Generation X and millennials. So, you know, our analog childhood, we had a digital adulthood. And so around that time, you know, I thought to myself, website development was quite a cool thing.
Yeah.
You know, coding is all about problem solving, and I enjoyed
Sure.
the mental processes behind that. So, just, you know, for example, I put myself on a website development course. I was building websites for the odd client here or there after school. And I landed up giving some marketing advice to a guy who came to ask me for some website development work. His business exploded, so he asked me to become a 50% partner, which I did.
Wow.
And then in a year's time, we decided to take the business in two different directions. So I sold my half back to him at something ridiculous, like 630-something% of what I paid for
How
it.
incredible.
So it was just, you know, I had some really great experiences like that that also just helped me to understand a little bit around how influence is important in business. But let me take you back. I'll take you through just very quickly the full journey.
Please do.
Of how I got, because I'm jumping around the time.
No, that's the
line here a
point.
little
That's
bit.
the point. Go for it.
So you asked how I got into it. I explained to you that I was meant to. But in a nutshell, I was always obsessed with being on stage, like I mentioned. Nearly failed high school because of it.
Because of it, yes.
Because I just had no idea how school was going to help me. If I could go back now, I would probably try a bit harder in school just for the discipline's sake.
Got you.
Came out of school, was basically a broke entertainer living at home with my folks. Like,
You and every other entertainer in South Africa.
yeah, like I was making websites every now and then just to kind of bridge the gap. It wasn't something I was really actively marketing.
Sure.
It was just something I enjoyed doing, but I just wanted to be on stage. But it wasn't paying very well, and so it was a bit of a tough time. But I was dating a girl at the time as well, who, you know, I know that our relationship wasn't based on money. But she was a little bit older than me. She wanted to settle down sooner than later. And there was just no way that I could support myself or her.
Yes.
I was still living at home with my parents. And so I kind of felt like a bit of a failure as a partner, even though I knew it wasn't based on money.
Sure.
Felt like I was failing myself, failing
Sure.
her. So this was kind of the situation that I was in. Something else that was really interesting, if I just kind of paint a picture of where I was at that point in my life, because that's where everything kind of pivoted. At that stage, besides having these monetary challenges, I realized that one of the reasons why I was so almost addicted to being up on stage and just performing what I did for audiences was it was kind of a way of self-medicating a low self-esteem.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Perfect sense.
You can imagine that
Yes.
if you're on stage and doing cool stuff
Yeah,
and everyone's going, wow,
Yeah.
it's pretty good for the ego, right?
Admiration and yes.
Exactly.
Got you.
Exactly. And so, if someone had to say to me back then that was what was going on, probably I wouldn't have been able to acknowledge it.
And you probably would have denied it.
Exactly.
Yeah, 'cause
It's
you'd be
taken
young.
quite some time for me to actually look back and realize, okay, that was in, if anyone listening follows, Carl Jung or any
Yes.
shadow work, that was
Yes.
definitely in my shadow, certain parts of myself that perhaps I would suppress, you know. And so, but when I stopped doing that and realized, okay, there was actually a part of me from back then that was a little bit insecure.
Sure.
And back then I would feel empowered on stage doing these cool things that no one could explain and just blew their minds and had people cheering. And then I would get off stage and chat to people at events or at parties and people who I thought were more successful, higher status, whatever the case was. And I'd always play the let me compare myself against you or my life against your life
Yes.
in my head, right? Doesn't Facebook and stuff make it even more prevalent today?
Agreed.
But back
Agreed.
then, before, I think back then it was still like MySpace. I don't even think Facebook was.
MySpace. MySpace.
I don't
Absolutely.
think Facebook had even come out yet.
No.
But that's what I did. So I had, now that put a huge cap on my influence as well. Because think about this for a second, right? If you have a poor self-image, that becomes part of your identity to yourself. And at the time in our lives when we start to feel like we're getting to know ourselves, so to speak, we also start to create a certain image of the type of life and the type of success
Yes.
that we think we either can have or should have, or we form an expectation
We do.
of what success will look like in our lives. And even if we want something that's even bigger than that, if that's not in what we think is realistic for us, then that we're never going to get there, right?
Yeah.
You have to really believe that something is part of your identity, that something belongs to you. So here's what would happen. I would be introduced to someone who could potentially open up great doors for me. But because I had that low self-image issue, which then also made me assign kind of a lower level of success to myself, or what I expected life to give me or to get in life, the minute I would have the potential to meet someone who could help me reach success even higher than that, it became very uncomfortable because I didn't relate to that level of success that was higher to what I had already started to imagine for myself.
Got you.
Do you know what I mean?
So you actually set your own ceiling.
I set my own ceiling.
Yeah.
So what happened is at the minute, okay, I could call this person, maybe something could be wildly successful, but then I think, but I'm not sure that's from, but I wouldn't even think it consciously.
No,
Sometimes I would
very
so you find yourself
subconsciously.
Procrastinating.
Yeah.
Like you got to make that call.
Yeah.
But there's something, you got that like serious call reluctance to make that phone call.
Yeah.
And then if I would land up speaking to people, then I just wouldn't have the kind of influence that I'd need to have.
Yes.
Because of these own self-limiting beliefs
Okay.
about this what I call a success identity that had become part of my personal identity. So I hope that makes sense. I'm still trying to work it out in my head.
No, it makes
It's not
perfect
like-
sense.
Yeah.
You know, I deal a lot with goal setting, and I always say to the guys that I'm working with, you need long-term goals, right? And you need short-term goals, and you need medium-term goals, and you need micro goals. But what you need is an overriding North Star goal that you can look at, and that can become your overriding. Because if you don't have that big one, you can limit yourself. You can literally, and let that big goal, that I want to be on the Joe Rogan podcast, Joe Rogan, as a North Star, right? And then let that guide your action. So yes, we've got these small little goals, but you're right. If you're too focused on the here and now, and it can be dangerous.
Yeah.
And like you say, you set your own ceiling.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm assuming this, as you grew in time and matured in time and became better at what you're doing, is the reason why the Influence Institute opened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm giving that's why this backstory is so important. Why I'm so passionate about equipping people around influence. So I'll speed up the story a little bit. Basically, times were tough. Came 2008, around there, the great economic crash. You know, the first thing companies were doing was either cutting their events or cutting the entertainment from the events that they decided to have.
Marketing
Very
budgets.
tough time, exactly. As an entrepreneur, which is what I was at that stage, marketing myself and trying to build my business, even though I was the product. It was a really tough time. And then one day a friend of mine gave me a CD back when we were still playing CDs in our cars.
Such an antiquated thing.
And it was from John Maxwell. Have you heard of him
I
before?
have.
Yeah.
John C. Maxwell.
John C. Maxwell, who's a serious leadership guru and
Yeah.
been voted leadership guru. I mean, he's written tens of millions of books.
I know.
I mean, it's crazy
Yeah.
how many books he's actually written. But there's one thing, if you follow John Maxwell's work, you'll know that there's one thing he always says, which is that everything rises and falls on influence.
Okay.
But this was the first time that I heard that. And it took me a long time to digest that. So I heard that CD again and again. It was a leadership CD. Again and again and again. And I realized immediately when I had the epiphany,
Yes.
that I had my strategy all wrong. I thought that one day, with enough talent and just putting myself out there,
Yeah.
I'm just going to somehow become famous.
Correct.
That was the goal. Let me be famous. And then once I'm famous, then people will listen to me. Then I'll have influence. Then people will hire me to come, present wherever I want to present or perform.
Yeah.
Then people will pay me more money. So I was just thinking, right, I've just got to be famous. That's going to give me all the influence and success that I need.
got you.
But actually it was the other way around. And that was the epiphany that I had, was actually it's not the success or the fame that comes before the influence. The influence has to come first.
I'm with you.
So I realized, I need to learn how to influence people in far stronger ways outside of what I knew in terms of mentalist influence. And once I had created that influence with people, that's what will make me successful or make me famous or whatever. At that time of my life, it was fame. Now it's changed somewhat.
Maybe a little bit of both.
Yeah. So I realized that I needed influence breakthroughs. I needed to be able to influence
Okay. I like that.
the media. Yeah. I needed to have a breakthrough with people in the media that they go, we want to have him on our shows. We want
Yes.
to write newspaper articles about him or put him on TV. I needed to have influence breakthroughs with corporates, with clients, to hire me to come and actually present or perform.
Yes.
Even with my own team, I needed to have influence breakthroughs because I had people who were helping me with shows and stuff like that. And I thought, if I'm going to step up the bar, I'm going to need people to take care of stuff, in our team. So there was just influence all around, all these influence gaps that I identified, and these barriers
very
I needed to have these
interesting.
breakthroughs. And where I was quite fortunate is that as a mentalist, I knew a lot about influence, but it was taught to me in a very narrow context,
Okay.
which is I get up on stage, I invite some people to try and experiment, I'm going to do certain things with them, and that was it. I'd never before considered that I could decode a lot of the psychology I was using on stage
And transfer that.
into other
Yes.
areas of my life and my business.
Got you.
It seems so obvious now, but I just didn't. So what I did is that I started to decode that and then started to match it up to what all of the literature out there, psychologists, scientists, behavioral economists, what all of the literature out there, because there's decades of research on influence and persuasion psychology. And I realized that there were a lot of things that I should be doing to just build my brand, build my client base, do all of that stuff, lead people better, and that's what I started to do. And then one day, someone in my network said to me, "You got to have brunch with Robbie Brosen,
Okay.
who started Nando's." So I don't know how it was great. Next minute, I landed up at Tasha's in Athol having brunch with Robbie. And at the end of it, Robbie said to me, "Gilan, you should be out there consulting with companies and sharing
Your
all of the
knowledge.
stuff that you've
Yeah.
been learning and that you've been using. And through your unique lens as a mentalist, this is great stuff. So you should go into consulting." And he also said something that was a correct prediction. He said it's going to be very difficult moving from the entertainment space into the expert space.
Yes.
So how do you go and say, "Oh, look, I can do some fun stuff on stage,"
Yeah.
to now I'm going to consult
Guide
with
your
people
business. Yeah.
who've got twice the amount of business experience than I do. So it kind of put me starting right from scratch again. I had zero influence in the expert space. And here I wanted to influence companies to hire me to speak to them about influence, but I had no influence.
The problem.
This was the problem, right?
Yeah.
So, long story short, I basically just focused on using all the principles that I had learnt and that I had been discovering and practicing and applying to my business, and the results of just really applying very deliberate ethical, obviously, influence
course.
principles,
Of course.
is that now, like we mentioned, I've got my book, which became a bestseller.
Yeah.
I've now presented in almost 30 countries around the world, you know, in
Wow.
Africa and Asia, Europe, the
incredible.
States, yeah. Which is really, really cool. And so all of those issues that I had when I was younger, the lifestyle issues, the money issues, all of that stuff's been solved. But probably one of the biggest challenges that I had when I was younger, that influence has helped me to solve, and understanding influence and applying it every day, is the internal transformation that I've had from the Gilan who was really, you know, on stage just to try and help that low self-image, and the kind of people who I'd look to and always feel second rate to, those same people are now my peers. I get to share the stage with them.
Yes, indeed.
I was at John Maxwell's house a few years ago for a cocktail party at his
Wow.
house in West Palm Beach.
And
So-
you have to sit back and reflect and go, wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is, you know, it's a huge transformation from then until now. And so it's not just about influencing others, but you become so empowered when you understand influence and you understand the role it plays in your life.
Sure.
And how it's more of a science than an art.
There, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Most certainly. I'm fascinated with psychology, and I think which is why I was so drawn to having you on the podcast, because I realize very much so that mentalism is a form of understanding psychology, because it's human behavior, right? And so I think it's, yeah, like I say, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on, I love that psychological side. And from psychology, yes, there's human behaviors, internal and external, but there is a science that you can use and that you can base these foundations on. And you know what, if you write 70 to 80% of the time, well, it's better than a guess. And
Exactly.
yeah.
And the thing is that obviously the psychology doesn't work on everyone all the time.
Of course.
I mean, can you imagine someone leading the world who just knew how to, you know,
Yeah.
absolutely mind control everyone? We're complex
It
creatures,
wouldn't
right?
work. It wouldn't work.
But
right?
we know that if you do things a certain way, you're going to get a higher chance of influencing people.
Yeah.
So obviously, I mean, influence is a broad topic.
Yeah.
But
you paint a brush, and with one stroke, you're going to cover the majority of the surfaces, but you can't cover all the surface in one brush stroke.
Exactly.
Or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But that's basically why I'm so passionate about equipping people just to unleash their influence.
And you know what the amazing thing is, Gilan? I'm having you on this because I believe that you have a message to deliver, and I thought that this was the message, and it really is. And I was writing my guesstimation, but again, what I'm trying to do is add value and teach, and I do that in my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, teach, and I do that in my consultancy, teach, and I derive so much pleasure from giving others. You know, so I understand as an entertainer, it was so much fun. But I think now there's a different purpose. There's a different meaning behind your life now. And I'm sure you could go out and you still perform. Because I've seen some of your presentations. It's part business, part performance, because you get to show people that wow factor. This is what I want to show you. And this is the power of that in terms of this mentalism. And I think it's a stroke of genius. I love it.
Thank you.
But you get to perform and you get to change people's lives.
Exactly.
How great is that?
Yeah.
How great is that?
Yeah, it's fulfilling. You know, I include the mentalist pieces even in my talks.
I know. I've
Because a lot of people have never experienced a mentalist before, and they've just never had any kind of experience with that. Should we try a little something for your
If
listeners
you want to go,
and,
please
and
do.
for you to experience something?
Please do.
Because you've never had a personal experience with mentalism.
I've watched Darren Brown to the nth degree.
Yes.
And Penn and Teller, etc. It's L, but no, not one-on-one. No.
Okay, cool. So let's try this.
'Kay,
And listen,
let's give
there's
it a bash.
always a chance it could go wrong.
100%.
If it does, you don't need to edit it out.
I can't. It's one
It's fine.
go.
I can deal with it. It's
Okay.
cool. Listen, I've gotten stuff wrong live on TV. I've
Sure.
gotten stuff wrong in my show, so it's all good. But if it works, it'll be cool. So, I mentioned earlier that if we would try something, I wanted
Yes.
to try something called the puzzle experiment.
Agreed.
Which is a kind of a visual experiment where I'm going to have you visualize these different pieces of a puzzle floating in front of you with a picture on it. And so obviously you got a picture in your mind.
I
and
do.
just to confirm for everyone watching or listening to this, I did not tell you to think of a specific type of picture.
No.
Like, we've not said anything up here.
Nothing. nothing. I would never allow that. I don't live lies.
Exactly. You haven't told anyone else either,
No.
right? Like there's no one here who you could have told that could have
No.
come and whispered in my ear
No
or
one.
anything like that.
No one.
So right now, if you had to imagine this picture in front of you in pieces, kind of in puzzle pieces,
Yes.
that's only in your mind, right?
Correct.
And so here's what we're going to try to do. Just keep your gaze in my direction over here. I want you to imagine two of those pieces coming together. Just any two puzzle pieces, but obviously they need to fit together.
Got it.
All right. As you pick, and so you've got that in front of you. That's really interesting. That's really interesting. So here's what I want you to just think of some of the main shapes in this picture that you're thinking
of it.
Obviously, some pictures are more complex than others, but generally we could probably find some kind of geometric shapes in it. Do me a favor, just while you're looking at me, don't give away what it is, but just say triangle, say square, say circle, say rectangle, say diamond. It's not that. I just wanted to be sure about something. Say, do me a favor, just one more time. There's just two kind of similar things that I'm picking up from you. So just say square, circle, square, circle. Now those two pieces in your mind, those two puzzle pieces that came together, they didn't form a circle, did they?
They did.
They did form a circle. Here's what I'll tell you why I'm unsure about this. I'm picking up circle from you.
Yes.
But this is kind of weird. When I asked you to put the two puzzle pieces together, I feel like you considered putting two halves of a circle together.
Okay.
But you didn't go with that. And what's confusing me is that I'm sensing some straight lines, almost like I'm just sensing like not something that's completely round. I'm sensing so this is why I wanted you to go cycle through the different shapes like that.
Okay.
Because I feel like you could have either changed your mind while you were deciding which pieces, or perhaps even with those pieces coming together, you perhaps had circles in mind. I don't know why, but you definitely had something.
Circles definitely.
Yeah.
Straight lines definitely.
So I'm not picking up square, I'm not picking up diamond or triangle in any bit. Here's what I want you to imagine in your mind. Just imagine that you're staring at this picture, and you got two more pieces coming together, and another two. So just the way that you're putting it together, which is interesting. Some people, when they think of a picture, I can sense that they've got like a vertical, like let's say they're thinking of a building, could be like a skyscraper, would be a vertical picture.
Yes.
Not you. You're thinking of something, you're building this thing kind of horizontally as you're going along as well.
I am,
so it's definitely something that's long and not something that's tall.
Yes.
And for the last one or two questions, just imagine the front of it then.
Okay.
Imagine the back of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you see how quickly that happens. So there's definitely a type of symmetry here. So I'm sensing that the back is similar to the front. And I'm going to imagine, just based on what we've said here, that there's probably a circle at the one end and a circle at the other end. You're not thinking of a bicycle, are you?
Are you kidding me, dude?
It is, okay.
It's
so
a bicycle.
I assume that is...
Holy shit. And I mean, it's for my listeners and for everybody watching, we decided we may or may not play this game, and sort of as an intro into the game, you were like, draw a basic shape, something sort of stick figure-ish, not too complex. And I mean, I can't draw the Mona Lisa, right? And I literally drew the two shapes of the bicycle, the wheels, the connecting. There was the triangle because it comes down like that, and the handles and the seat.
Right.
That is ridiculous. That is proper ridiculous. But okay, this brings me to something else that I really want to discuss with you. And wow, by the way. Okay,
I'm glad,
so that was really cool.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Because, I mean, come on. It could have been anything.
Well, listen, just remember this. A lot of people, when they talk to me about intuition, intuition in a non-psychic way,
Yes,
because I'm
of
not a
course.
psychic.
Of course.
Kind of,
Of course.
Sorry for anyone who thought
Yeah.
that was.
Damn it.
I'm not a psychic. Intuition is when slivers of tons of experience comes together, right?
Yes.
And so we've got two different parts to our brain. We have what we call fast and slow thinking.
Okay.
And this is really fascinating with intuition. So fast thinking would be if I had to say to you, Huntley, what is 1 + 1?
2.
Complete the sentence. Salt and?
Pepper.
Right. That's fast thinking. Very easy, right?
So glad I got that right.
And slow thinking, which is what we call system 2 thinking.
Okay.
What is 37 times 42?
I don't know.
Well, you're not sure, right?
Yes.
But if you had to try work it out, that would
Yes.
be what we call slow thinking,
Got you.
right? It's more the analytical thinking.
Yes.
So if I had to tell you, right, 37 times, what did I say? 42.
42.
Now, if I had to give you 3 options of probable answers,
Okay.
and I'd say which one is most probable. Okay, and the equation is 37 times 42. Would 56 or 471 or 5,060?
471.
Now that would be fast.
Probabilities.
Probability,
Correct.
right? That again, now you can see that would be the
Yes.
fast thinking
Yes,
that
yes,
you
yes,
that
I've
you
got
use.
you.
Okay. So what happens so often is that our fast thinking can happen where we get where our mind is already picking up patterns based on experience,
Okay.
and so it becomes a feeling before our slow thinking even has an opportunity to put a label on it or to name it.
Yes,
right?
okay.
So this is why you might find a bunch of firefighters storm into a room. They look around. Structurally, everything looks correct. Suddenly, the chief says, "Everyone get out!" And as they go out, everything
Boom.
collapses.
Yes.
You say, "Well, how did you know?" He said, "I just had a feeling."
Yeah.
That's that fast thinking, just picking up stuff super quick.
Yes.
Now I've done that.
Extrasensory perceptions coming in, dissecting, analyzing based on past experience, formulating a
Exactly.
an
We're
opinion.
looking for patterns all the time. This is how, it's if you study grandmaster chess players, what actually happens, they look at the board and their mind is picking up patterns. It's not about just thinking about one move at a time. They're
yeah.
actually picking up patterns on the chessboard.
Okay.
So when we've done something again and again and again, I mean, you should know this from jiu-jitsu. How
Yeah.
many times do you probably call it muscle memory, right?
100% what we
But
call
at the
it.
end of the day, that's fast thinking.
thinking.
You're not analyzing to yourself, should I now step here and counter his with my count? No, it's just happening.
Yes.
So that's the fast thinking. If
Okay.
you had to actually sit there and try and analyze it, you'd be pinned on the ground before you could do anything big. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
So
Literally, you're right.
exactly, which is the same as what I just did with you now. I've done this experiment so many times. So if I start picking up certain things,
Yeah.
I know the probability of what it could be. So I can jump to conclusions
ridiculous.
a lot quicker. But if that was the first time I'd ever done it, I probably would have spent, 10 times longer trying to get
got
every
you.
single detail.
Yes. Yes.
So
yes.
it's when you say it could be anything, I also know from experience that if I'm picking up those sort of shapes or those sort of cues, chances are that it's going to be within a certain selection of what I know most people would choose in those categories. Do you know what I'm saying?
So
I've done it enough times to know.
probabilities.
It's not just probabilities, it's because I've had so much experience doing it that I know based on that experience what the probability
Got
is.
you. Got you.
But it could have been a different probability for another person sitting here who could have drawn something different.
Yeah.
I'm going to get just enough information from you to then jump to that
got you.
conclusion.
Wow.
Yeah.
So something really, really interesting happened, and I got to tell you about this. The moment I started telling people that we were in conversation and that there was a probability and possibility that the podcast would happen, I had two very, very, very polarized reactions to that. The one spectrum was immediately guys going, "That is flippin' cool. I can't wait for this podcast." And the other ones were like, "Oh no, rather you than me." Okay, very polarized. And it was very interesting to observe this. I too am very fascinated with individuals and what their motivation systems are. And I started watching this happen more and more and more and more and more. And to state my case, even to the nth degree, is last night I walked up to my brother and I said to him, "Look, I've got Gilan on tomorrow. Any idea of some cool questions?" He was like, no, fuck that. That's what he said to me. He was like, no, thank you. Right? And it just even polarized it more. But I have an hypothesis that I'd
Yeah.
like to share with you.
What, are they scared or what?
Well, here's the thing.
Right.
I believe that every single human being wants to believe, right, that they're in control of their lives and that their decision-making process is that of their own and that their influence is limited and ultimately I am the master of my own destiny and my own thoughts. Now you've got two sides of the coin. The one that goes, Huntley Smith, I know I can be manipulated. I appreciate how much I can be manipulated. Manipulate me. And the other guys who are going, no, I don't want to be manipulated. I don't want to believe that I can be so easily manipulated. Because essentially that's what you're doing. I mean, mentalism is manipulation to a large degree, right? And I think these are these two polar opposites. The one guys are like, oh my God, that's going to be amazing. And the other guys are like, no thanks. Rather you than me. They actually don't want to sit in the same room as you. It's fear.
That's good to know.
It's fear of control, don't you think?
Yeah. Look, I mean, that's
and your
the
own
thing
human fallibility.
Definitely. You know, I love what Dan Ariely, I'm not sure if you've heard of him, he's a great psychologist. No. He coined the term being predictably irrational.
Okay.
And we think that we're irrational, or that we make decisions on a whim, or that we behave in kind of these random ways based purely on our
ourselves,
mind and what we feel like doing at that time. But actually what we find is that as irrational as we are, so to say, our irrationality starts to happen the same way over and over and over and over again, and we become predictably irrational.
I like that.
And so the least predictable we try to be, the more predictable we actually become.
Yes.
So we don't like to admit, like you say, we don't like to think that we have these kind of inner drives that control us unconsciously, but we do.
Yeah.
And thank goodness we do, because mostly these are tools that our brains use to be able to survive.
Correct. Automating things.
And exactly,
Yeah.
and mental shortcuts. So, I mean, this is in psychology, we call them heuristics, which are mental shortcuts that assist us to have decision making, for example, happen really quickly.
Sure.
Because we can't decide stuff, you know, really analyze everything from scratch.
Of course.
All the time.
A lion runs in many years ago. I don't process a lion, teeth. I just run. I just react.
It's
a survival instinct.
You're in the forest.
It's a survival instinct.
You're a caveman in the forest. The bush rustles. You're thinking, is that the wind? Is it a tiger? By that time you're dead, right?
Yeah.
The tiger's charged you.
Yeah.
So no, you see the rustling in the bush. Your mind picks up patterns.
Yeah.
Could be a tiger. You're out of there. You know.
Absolutely.
So
no, it's a survival.
It is, and
mechanism.
thank goodness we have these heuristics, because they really help us. But they can also obviously lead us astray.
Of course.
You know, if I had to ask you, what do you think happens more often in this world? Do you think it's people dying from stomach cancer or people dying in car accidents? What do you think?
Car accidents.
And that's what most people, in fact, everyone I've ever asked this to says, actually it's stomach cancer.
Oh, wow.
But why do we think car accidents?
Because we see it more.
Exactly.
Yes.
So this is what we
it gets
call
portrayed more.
We call that an availability heuristic. Is that it's a shortcut that your brain is taking, that if you see or hear of something more, then it's more easily available to your mind.
I've got you.
And so you get that feeling.
Yes.
And so you made a judgment call based on just a feeling. You didn't have the actual stats.
No
it was
data.
a feeling, right?
Yeah.
So when it comes to really powerful persuasion and influence, and I just want to, by the way, just at this juncture mention,
Please.
because we've spoken a lot, we've used words like manipulation and all that kind of, and persuasion. These are all neutral terms.
I agree with you there.
It's like a surgeon's knife. It
So
can be used for good or
That's
for
it.
bad. It
You can
depends on the
manipulate
person.
me to take drugs, or you can manipulate me to self-introspect and understand myself better.
Exactly.
That's a good manipulation. It's
Yeah.
just a word.
Exactly.
I agree with you
It's a
there.
neutral term.
I agree with you.
It's just a tool that can be used for great or for
Yeah,
evil.
if you were a dictator trying to bring in Marxism,
That would be bad,
Bad,
right? Exactly.
yes.
So, you know, I have a specific model of influence. I call it my MRI3 model, which is mentalist rapid influence. And it's how to influence people as rapidly as possible.
Wow.
Either in the context of leadership or sales or marketing or whatever the context is. And the model is formed around creating trust, credibility, and a sense of support as quickly as possible using heuristics.
Okay.
Because in today's fast-moving world, where we don't have much time and interactions are so fast and sometimes so fleeting, we've got so much attention spans, information's being blasted at us, lots of noise in the marketplace, whatever the case may be. We need to create rapid influence. And the only way to really establish that rapidly is by using heuristics.
Wow.
Now, once you've created that influence, obviously, if you're going to create that sense of trust, but then you go and break someone's trust, you're going to lose it.
Agreed.
So it's not about manipulating people
Yes.
into
And
some
it's
false...
also it's not short term. You know, that needs to be backed with long term actual trust and relationship and value.
Exactly.
Yes.
But when you first meet someone and you want to, say, engage with them and have them, let's say, become a client, you got to establish that credibility and trust and that that relationship of support as quickly as possible, so that they obviously buy into your ideas or buy from you, or whatever the case may be.
Got you.
So that all uses that same psychology of mental shortcuts and heuristics. There are certain ways to do things and certain ways to engage with people that's going to give them the feeling, the same way that you made that judgment call of it's car accidents,
yes.
They're going to make that judgment call of I can trust you, or you're a credible person who can actually help me, or whatever the
And
case
what's
is.
interesting is I also do relationship management training in my management consulting, and I always say two things: people buy from people they like, people buy from people they trust.
Yeah,
Same thing. I mean, we're from completely different worlds, but ultimately we're saying the same thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
The famous saying is that all things being equal, people like to do business with those who they know, like, and trust, and that's not entirely true, because even if all things are not equal, people like to do business with those who they know, like, and trust. So it really is that powerful and often underestimated. But as a mentalist, yes, I'm using these things to obviously open people's minds and have some fun with the entertainment side. But the practical aspect of this is just so enormous. And I honestly believe that being able to influence the people around us in both our professional and personal lives is the number one skill to be able to succeed or to be effective at anything in life. Because nothing truly great was ever accomplished by the lone wolf. We need other people to help us.
We do. Yeah, it takes society to build a toaster.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. Exactly.
Yeah, it's a TED Talk.
Yeah.
Phenomenal
really?
TED Talk. Yeah.
Oh, look it up.
Yeah, it takes a society to build a toaster. But it really is. In so many instances, the difference between success and failure lies in our network, in the people we know, in the people we can rely on, in our mentors, in self-actualization. And I believe that in the majority of that, it comes down to being able to influence somebody, or be influenced.
Yeah.
Yeah, massively so.
Exactly.
So, quick question. I assume that you believe in something like sort of evolutionary psychology. Okay, that there are these intrinsic keys that we react to. I fully agree that we are influenced by our environment, 100%, and society influences us. But because of these deep-seated chaoses, which now become predictable, is that what allows you to play your game in South Africa and play your game in India or Europe, where you've got completely different cultures? And do those cultures play a different role? Does it make it harder for you if you go to the UK, for argument's sake, as opposed to South Africa? How does that cultural aspect fit in?
Well, the first time I went to the UK, I didn't know that the term mentalist meant that you belong in the loony bin. It's changing now, thanks to the likes of Darren Brown.
Yeah.
But yeah, it depends what I'm doing. So I mean, in terms of instinctual human drives and so on, we find that it is very much the same all around the world.
Okay.
There are some cultural differences,
of course,
especially if you start looking at things like nonverbal communication. One needs to be aware of certain things, but typically speaking, if I'm going to try and experiment in a country I've never been to, I'll try to do something that I know works on what is kind of universal or that's hardwired into us, and not something that would be
more culturally based,
culturally influenced.
Yeah.
If you go
ask somebody to draw a vuvuzela.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll obviously take that into consideration, and yes, there are. It's the thing is that I explained heuristics, right?
Yes.
So heuristics can become updated as well, and they can change.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. In terms of marketing, comes Facebook. We're cool. We on Facebook. We love to see content.
Sure.
Now we start seeing these really cool headlines like, check out this list of
the
X,
top
Y, and
10
Z.
clickbait.
Number 7 will make you cry. And you're
Clickbait.
thinking, what?
Yeah.
I'm going to cry. You click and it's disappointing.
Yes.
Right?
Every
and number 7 didn't
single
make you cry.
time.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the thing is that, but you don't know that. So now the next thing comes up and it says, they were silent and then she started singing or whatever. Like now, and at 3 minutes 42, you'll be shaking in your seat. And no, I wasn't shaking in my seat, right? Like she was good, but like what happened is that over time now, that heuristic in our mind starts to form.
Okay.
That the minute we see something that looks clickbaitish as a piece of content, we are starting to expect that when we click on it, we're going to be disappointed.
Yes.
It's going to be a waste of our time, or it's going to just be, the junk food end of content, And so this has actually formed quite a challenge for writers who need to come up with amazing, attractive headlines
to get people,
but that don't sound too clickbaitish, right? So our heuristic can start to update. It's the same thing that if you take someone who's a carpenter and you show him a plank of wood, probably he could estimate the length of it with quite some accuracy. But take someone who's never dealt with that stuff in his life and say, how long is that? He probably won't be as accurate. Because the person who's been dealing with it most, they're building up those mental shortcuts, right?
Yes.
So the same thing happens when it comes to anything like going into a different culture somewhere else in the world, is that people will be exposed to different things, and so their heuristics can start to change as well. So obviously one needs to keep in mind that when you're dealing with different people, that what are the shortcuts in their brains that have
got you. How would you even go about determining that? I mean, that last statement, determine their heuristics, that's a hell of a thing. You said that very flippantly.
Right.
But I mean, how the hell do you go about determining that?
Well, you just got to get into the heads of your target market.
Okay. Nice. And hear what they have to say.
Look, I mean, it's obviously when it comes to market research and that kind of stuff, you got to just ask yourself the right questions to try and determine what are some of the things that they're exposed to, and how could that change what they've come to like or not like, or what they're able to detect or not detect. And that would be part of a whole marketing strategy, obviously. But that's definitely something to consider.
Yeah.
So I just remember us talking about that traveling overseas and different cultures and heuristics. I'm not sure if there was another question that I was supposed to answer that I may have forgotten about.
No. Yeah. That was it. That was perfect. It was just it was interesting to find out if the mentalism works anywhere in the world because of those basic fundamental heuristics, as opposed to would you need to change it for each culture, or would you change it for each country, or if there was those overriding things.
Yeah.
I suppose overriding, I don't know what to call them, heuristics.
Yeah. It's the thing, like people will respond to scarcity. So if they know that there's something that they could miss out on, then they feel more inclined to want it. It creates a bigger impulse to want it, right? Exactly. But obviously, if someone's going to see a really cheap scarcity tactic being used by a company over and over again, it's actually they're going to lose influence because that heuristic is updating, and they're saying that's not real scarcity. Yeah. Exactly. So one just needs to be aware of it. But yes, there are those underlying universal ones, but there are some nuances and there's subtleties on top of it.
So in the next couple of years, or let's bring it even closer, what's next for you? What is your next project, focusing on obviously the Influence Institute, but is there anything else that we can look forward to?
So at the moment, my business is really B2B. I get hired by companies to go and talk to their conferences. And for me, I want to reach as many people around the world. So I am slowly evolving to include a B2C kind of component, which is basically for the people who can't afford to pay me the fees to go and present at their conference or their small businesses. I'm creating online courses that the end consumers, that people sitting at home, the individuals who might not have the benefit of working for a big company that'll hire me, that they can tap into what I teach.
I mean, that's something that I'd personally be massively interested in, just because. Yeah.
Just because you love it.
I do it.
And you're a learnaholic, right?
Yeah, I'm a little bit of an autodidact, yes. Yeah.
So this is what I'm doing. I'm actually in the process. I'm about a third way filming my course, which is all about sales and marketing.
Okay.
And how to understand influence. So there, I mentioned to you earlier my MRI3 model of influence, which I talk about there. And then I have what I call my MRI3 hero framework, which is a specific structural framework of using my model on to be able to take people through a process where they'll be more influenced to buy from you or to follow you. I guess it's not in the scope of this discussion to talk much about it. Maybe if we have a future one, I
100%, man.
But But yeah, that for me, that is what I'm really passionate about. I feel like I can reach millions of people that way.
I agree.
Where someone in any English-speaking country will be able to, for starts, anyways, will be able to, sign in and buy one of my courses and be able to start transforming their business or their life through what I teach. So that's really the up and coming for me.
Digital space is where it's at. That's
Exactly.
where we've got to go. I mean, look at what's happening in the world. Look at just podcasting alone. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I'd like to mention to you, just as some advice, is I went on last week to buy your book, and I'm an audio book fanatic. And I was like, I couldn't find it on audio. But again, that's sort of the route that a lot of guys are taking now. Audio is becoming king because, and I believe why audio is becoming so great is because TV takes time. Right, audio I can do on the fly, I can do in my car, I can get, I listen to ebooks and podcasts every single day for that reason. I can get out of my car, listen to a book, get back in my car, and off we sort of go, So nevertheless, I think audio is becoming king.
Yeah. So I'm launching a podcast this year called Influence Breakthroughs.
Wonderful.
How
fantastic.
Because that was what I realized I needed in my life
Yeah.
to transform, was the influence breakthroughs of different people.
Yeah.
So I'll be interviewing people who have reached certain levels of success and had influence breakthroughs along the way to identify what
they
those
were.
were and
Oh,
how they
wow.
came about.
How incredible.
So that we can learn how to create those. Because again, life is about recognizing patterns. And so one of the beautiful things about podcasts like this, where you get to just hear people's stories, and because
Absolutely.
we're always thinking, when that happens or something similar happens in my life, we now
How do I react?
How do I react?
Yeah, I've got a
how to work out
framework.
for other people.
Agreed.
Exactly.
And it's unrealistic to think that everybody's going to read. If I could wave my magic wand around and just get everybody to pick up a book, I would do so. But it's realistic to think that a lot of people can download audio or can listen at least, and you've hit the nail on the head. This is why I do what I do, to give people a framework, because the majority of the people on here are wildly successful to one or another degree, or influential to one or another degree, or an expert to one or another degree. And that's I get to sit here. It's a very selfish thing. I get to sit here and listen to it, but also the other guys do. And that's exactly what you're saying in terms of that framework. And I think that is absolutely phenomenal. And I've got access to a couple of big CEOs that I'd love to pass on to you.
Oh, I'd love that.
Yeah,
Thank
with
you.
absolute pleasure. I think that would be so cool, because I do agree that I think audio is the way. What do you know what your show's going to be called and what the details are?
Well, at the moment, I think I'm going to call it Influence Breakthroughs.
Okay.
As that. At the moment, it's just an idea in my head. I've bought the equipment,
Okay.
or at least most of it, and I
Nice.
have a new lady joining my team next week who's going to be producing it. As one of her projects that she's working on in my team. So I'm really excited about it.
Incredible.
Yeah, if you have a cool name that you think of, I'd love to hear
I'll
it.
think about it. Yeah. And the naming is important. The naming is very, very important. Identity is very, very important. But yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to leave with the last thing. As I've gotten into podcasting, I've begun to realize what it's going to take. Look, I think your podcast would be a lot more successful than mine is off the bat, and that's understandable. You're a public person and you're a public figure. But one thing about the podcasting community is they are so supportive. It's absolutely incredible, man. You can go onto multiple forums, and it's just incredible how all the podcasters are. How can I help you? How can I help you? How can we make this work? How can we make this work?
Yeah.
And it's I haven't seen it in the entertainment industry in South Africa in any other. Maybe you've seen it in terms of what you do from a mentalist point of view, how the magicians and the mentalists and the guys sort of work together. Very much the same in the podcast community.
Yeah.
It's
well,
very cool.
a rising tide lifts all ships.
Absolutely.
And I think that if everyone's learning off each other and helping each other succeed, which is, then that'll keep fueling it. So I'm really glad to hear that that's kind of the culture in the
it is
community.
very much so.
Good.
And on that, I know that you need to rush off to another meeting. It has been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thank you, Gilan. I hope to have you on again.
Thank you.
And
I
I
enjoyed
hope
it
to
too.
help out any way I can in your podcast in the future.
Thank you.
Even if it's just from a knowledge-based point of view. And that's it, guys. Everybody, thank you very much for tuning in. So long, and thanks for all the fish. Ciao.
Ciao.
All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed that podcast as much as I did. Gilan is just such an interesting individual, and yes, bicycle. It's true. I've actually got the picture, and I'm going to post it up so you guys can see the goddamn little bicycle that I drew. But he definitely got me. As always, this podcast is brought to you by my main equipment sponsor, Jared Smith. His album is out and available on iTunes as well as Spotify now. So go out and get it, guys. To Teletrack, my studio sponsors, thank you so much, guys. I really enjoyed doing the podcast. At the studios, and to Bisha IT, who is busy working on new platforms for the podcast. Just keep your eye on the space, because we're going to be available on iHeartRadio very, very soon. As always, if you like the podcast and appreciate the guests, please subscribe to the various channels, specifically iTunes and YouTube. And if you're feeling particularly generous, guys, drop a review. I'd really appreciate that. From a social media point of view, the Thought Lab is available on Twitter at ThoughtLPC and on Facebook, which is the Thought Lab Podcast. So, guys, have a great day. I really appreciate your time. I really, really value you guys as listeners, and I love what we're doing. And I'll catch you on the next one. Ciao.